everyone. This is Crime Alley Comics. Welcome to episode 39 of the Comic Book Artist Spotlight. We will be focusing on Rob Liefeld for tonight's Spotlight. And believe me, I did find a lot of information on him, so I'm not sure. I may have to make this two videos. I may have to make a part 1 and part 2 because there is a lot of information about Rob Liefeld. And most people probably already know this, but Rob Liefeld was one of the founders of Image Comics. And, so he done several titles for Image. He's also done several titles for Marvel Comics. I don't remember now. I'm sure it's in here. But he was either creator or co-creator of Deadpool. And this is one artist that I was able to find a lot of information out about. So I was really happy about that. But like I said, I don't want to make the videos too awful long. So I may have to split this one into a part 1 and part 2. So let's get started and learn a little bit about Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld was born October the 3rd of 1967. I didn't realize he was that old because he really doesn't look that old. But he's only 3 years younger than me, so yeah, he's up there a little bit. He is an American comic book artist, comic book creator even, and writer, because he has written several stories for several different books. So he's a prominent writer and artist in the 1990s. He is known for co-creating the character Cable with writer, I believe it's Louise Simonson, and the character Deadpool with writer Fabian Nicieza. In the early 1990s, Liefeld gained popularity due to his work on Marvel Comics, The New Mutants, and later X-Force in 1992. He and several other popular Marvel illustrators left the company to found Image Comics, which started a wave of comic books owned by their creators rather than by publishers. The first book published by Image Comics was Liefeld's Young Blood #1. Liefeld has been called one of the most controversial figures in the comic book industry for his drawing skills, business practices, and controversial comments. Rob Liefeld was born October 3rd of 1967, the youngest child of a Baptist minister and a part-time secretary. He and his sister, 7 years his senior, grew up in Anaheim, California. Liefeld's love of comics began as a child, which led early on to his decision to be a professional artist, a practice that began with his tracing artwork from comic books. As a high school student, he took basic fundamental art courses and attended comic book conventions at the nearby Disneyland Hotel, where he met creators such as George Perez, John Romita Jr., Jim Shooter, Bob Layton, Mike Zeck, and Marv Wolfman. Liefeld cites Perez along with John Byrne and Frank Miller as major influences on his art. Now for Rob's career. After graduating from high school, Liefeld took life drawing classes at a local junior college, working odd jobs for about a year, including as a pizza delivery man and construction worker, while practicing his artwork, samples of which he sent to small comic publishers as he was too intimidated to send them to the big two companies, Marvel and DC. Among the editors he sent art samples to, circa 1985, was Gary Carlson of MEGATON Comics. Carlson was working on MEGATON number 4 and was looking for replacements for artists who had moved on to bigger projects. Liefeld's submission packet consisted mostly of pin-ups of DC Comics characters like the Teen Titans and Legend of Superheroes, as well as some sketches of MEGATON characters. Some of these early pin-ups are visible on Liefeld's website. Although Carlson thought Liefeld's depictions of his characters was not sufficiently accurate and exhibited what Carlson characterized as some goofy anatomy, he found Liefeld's storytelling to be clear and his rendering style evocative of the influence of artist George Perez. Although Carlson liked Liefeld's work overall, he felt the young artist was not ready for professional work. Weeks later, he received another set of samples that were an improvement, and later still a 4-page Berserker story, not to be confused with the Marvel or Top Cow characters of the same name, along with pin-ups of the MEGATON characters Ultra Girl and Ultraman. Carlson used one of the pin-ups as the inside front cover to MEGATON 5, and Liefeld's Ultra Girl pin-up in the company's Who's Who type reference book, MEGATON Explosion number 1, June of 1987. The book also featured an entry for Liefeld's own creation, a team of superheroes called Young Blood, the very first appearance of the team in print. Carlson and his colleagues, Chris Ecker, later met with the teenage Liefeld, who at that point had not yet obtained his driver's license, at the Ramada O'Hare Hotel, which was then the location of the Chicago Comic-Con. Impressed with the artist's enthusiasm and the new art samples he showed them, Carlson gave Liefeld a test script in order to judge his ability to draw a page-to-page comic story. Although Carlson was impressed with Liefeld's layout, the story was eventually drawn by Gary Thomas by the time it saw print in MEGATON 7. 2 months later, Liefeld drew the team in an advertisement in MEGATON 8 in August of 1987 that indicated that it would next appear in MEGATON Special number 1 by Liefeld and writer Hank Canals, I believe, with a cover by artist Jerry Ordway. However, MEGATON's comics went out of business before the comic was printed. Now on to his success with DC and Marvel. Learning from a friend of a comic book convention in San Francisco, where a large number of editors would be in attendance, Liefeld and his friend drove several hours to San Francisco, where they stayed with his aunt and uncle. At the convention, he showed editors his samples and offered a package which consisted of 10 pages of sequential art featuring his own characters. Editor Dick Giordano, to whom Liefeld showed his sample at the DC booth, requested that Liefeld send him more samples. Although Liefeld was apprehensive about approaching the Marvel booth, he did so at his friend's urging, and as a result, editor Mark Grunwald, or maybe it's Greenwald, offered Liefeld a job illustrating an 8-page Avengers backup story featuring the Black Panther, much to the 19-year-old artist's surprise. Though the published story was ultimately illustrated by another artist, Liefeld was later given character design character design work by the publisher. His first published story was a DC Comics bonus book inserted in Warlord number 131, September of 1988. Editor Robert Greenberger recalled that Liefeld was discovered by my office mate, Jonathan Peterson, who was scrambling to find something for him to do. I had the Warlord bonus book slot coming up. So to keep Rob from finding work at our rival, I tapped him for that. Next came the 5-issue miniseries Hawk and Dove for DC Comics, the first issue of which was published with an October 1988 cover date. It was this work that first garnered Liefeld visibly among readers of mainstream comics. That same year, Liefeld drew Secret Origins number 28. Liefeld's layouts for Hawk and Dove number 5, which took place in a chaos dimension, were oriented sideways so that the reader would have to turn the comic book at a right angle to read them. Because this was done without editorial input, editor Mike Carlin cut and pasted the panels into the proper order. And Carl Kessel lightboxed them on the DC Comics paper to ink them. The letters column of Hawk and Dove, number 5, mentioned that Liefeld showed something new to an editor who thought he'd seen everything. Liefeld explained this was how the dimension had been portrayed the only other time it had been featured in the book, although Kessel said this was untrue. Shortly thereafter, Liefeld began doing more for Marvel Comics as well. His first assignment for them being the Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 23. And in 1989, Liefeld became the penciler for the Marvel series The New Mutants. Starting with issue number 86, he is generally credited for turning this lowest selling title of the X-Men franchise into a financial success, which underlined the increased popularity and clout that his stint on the title had earned him. With the New Mutants 98, Liefeld assumed full creative control over the series, penciling, inking, and plotting with Fabian Nicieza, writing dialogue. The New Mutants series ended with issue 100 and was replaced with a revamped version of the team called X-Force, whose 1999 debut issue sold 4 million copies, setting an industry-wide record later broken by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee's X-Men Volume 2, Number 1. The sales numbers were propelled by 1990's direct market sales strategies. 5 variant edition trading cards were polybagged with X-Force number 1 to encourage sales of multiple copies to single collectors, while X-Men number 1 was sold with 5 variant covers. As of 2013, X-Force number 1 remains the second highest selling comic book in history. The mid-1990s. Levi's began producing a series of TV commercials directed by Spike Lee for their 501 button fly jeans, which included an on-screen 800 number that viewers who worked in unique jobs could call in order to appear in the company's commercials. After calling the number and leaving a message describing himself and his career, Liefeld appeared in one of the commercials in which Lee interviews Liefeld about his career and his creation, X-Force. Liefeld was subsequently interviewed by Stan Lee in the second episode of the 1991 documentary series, The Comic Book Greats, in which he discussed how he broke into the industry, demonstrated his drawing techniques, and talked about his Levi's commercial. Now, leaving Marvel Comics, co-founding Image Comics. That's what we're going to talk about next. Liefeld's relationship with Marvel began to break down in 1991 when he announced plans in a black and white advertisement in the Comics Buyer's Guide to publish an original title with competitor Malibu Comics. The exact title is unknown, but according to journalist Michael Dean, it was something to the effect of The Executioner, a title whose similarities to Marvel's X-Men family of titles evoked the ire of Marvel's editor Bob Harris, who threatened to fire Liefeld if he used that title. Liefeld and several other popular young artists, including Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, I think it's Wilkie Portacio, Jim Valentino, and Mark Silvestri, left Marvel in 1992 to form Image Comics. Each co-founder formed his own studio under the Image banner, such as Liefeld's Extreme Studios and Liefeld's superhero team series Young Blood, which is partially a derivative of a 1991 Teen Titans series Liefeld had proposed to DC Comics was the first comic Image published. He appeared on an episode of The Dennis Miller Show to promote the book. The series' first issue met with negative reception from fans and critics for the unclear storytelling affected not only by Liefeld's art, but by the book's flip format, which some readers found confusing, as well as the book's poor anatomy, incorrect perspective, non-existent backgrounds, poor dialogue, and the late shipping of the book, a program that continued with subsequent issues. In an interview in Hero Illustrated number 4, October 1993, Liefeld conceded disappointment with the first four issues of Youngblood, calling the first issue a disaster. Liefeld explained that production problems as well as subpar scripting by his friend and collaborator Hank Canals, whose employment Liefeld later terminated, resulted in work that was lower in quality than that which Liefeld produced when Fabian Nicieza scripted his plots on X-Force, and that reprints of those four issues would be rescripted. Writer and Comic Buyer's Guide columnist Peter David pointed to Liefeld's scapegoating of Canals as an example of Liefeld's failure to take responsibility for his project and evidence that genuine collaboration with good writers like Louise Simonson and Fabian Nicieza, which some of the Image founders did not appreciate, had previously reflected better on Liefeld's art. Other titles produced by Liefeld's Extreme Studios during the 1990s include Bloodstrike, Glory, Prophet, and Evangeline, I believe is what it's called. In 1996, Liefeld and Lee's Studios signed with Marvel to re-envision several of the company's core series, an event called Heroes Reborn. Liefeld was contracted to write 12 issues of The Avengers, co-written with Jeff Loeb, and was to pencil 12 issues of Captain America. Due to disappointing sales, Marvel terminated the agreement after 6 issues and reassigned the two series to Lee's Studios, one of the most controversial episodes in Liefeld's career. We really have a lot of information left to cover, so I'm probably going to cut this video in half because I've already been running 24 minutes. So let's go ahead and talk about departure from Image. In June 1996, Mark Silvestri temporarily left Image with his Top Cow imprint over issues with Liefeld. With Image Comics executive director Larry Martyr saying Liefeld was making an increasing number of business decisions that were counterproductive to being a business partner. In early September, Liefeld issued a press release stating he was resigning his position at Image and leaving the group. Nearly simultaneously, the Image partners issued a press release stating that they had fired Liefeld. His resignation came only minutes before the second meeting that would have forced him out. Liefeld moved all his publishing ventures into a new company, Awesome Comics. This new enterprise, announced in April of 1997 as a partnership between Liefeld and Malibu Comics founding partner Scott Mitchell Rosenberg, concentrated its efforts on newer properties. I think I'm going to end it at that point. And when I pick up with part 2, we'll talk about the startup of Awesome Comics. And so for right now, though, I'm going to go ahead and show you. Well, you know what? I'm not going to show any books yet, other than the ones that you've been seeing along the way. I will put my books up at the end of part 2. So we will cut the video off at this point for part 1, and we will continue on with part 2 with the startup of Awesome Comics. So I hope everybody's enjoying this. I wasn't very prepared tonight because I'm actually recording this the night that I'm going to be trying to upload it. So because I normally do this on Tuesday night, and things happen, and I didn't get a chance to work on it hardly at all. I mean, I did pull a few books, and I was able to pull some pictures off the internet and stuff like that. But normally I have the entire thing recorded Tuesday night, and then I'm ready to edit and upload the next night. So tonight I have to actually do the video, edit, and upload. So anyway, I'm going to let you guys go. We've been into this, 27, almost 28 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed this. We will continue on with part 2 of Rob Liefeld in my next video. It'll probably be next Wednesday before I get this up. So we'll get this one up today, and then episode 40 will be part 2 of Rob Liefeld. Thanks everybody for joining me tonight. Have a great rest of the week. God bless, and we'll see you all next video.